everyone. Welcome to the Light Gate. It's a beautiful Monday, and I hope all your weekends were glorious. Tonight, we have a really great guest, and he is a really good author, and he has got some really good things to talk about. I am hoping that you are all ready to go, and we're going to turn it over to Preston. Go, Preston.
Thank you, Dolly. I am so happy that you could all join us tonight. Oh my gosh, what episode are we? I think this is, well, let me look it up real quick so I know. Episode 46. Hey, so thank you all for joining us for episode 46 of The Light Gate. I thank you all so much for joining us tonight. It's because of you we do this show and are able to talk to so many interesting people. I, of course, am Preston Dennett, and my lovely co-host is Dolly Saffron. Hi, Dolly. Hope you're doing well tonight. Yes, we have an awesome guest. And you read the call numbers, right? Gosh,
Oh my gosh. See, I'm so excited. I forgot. We're coming to you live from the UPRN, United Public Radio Network at 107.7 in the beautiful city of New Orleans. We're also coming to you from the UFO Paranormal Radio Network at 105.3 FM. We're on Roku, we're on Facebook, we're on YouTube, and many, many radio stations across the planet.
All right.
I'm excited. I'm sorry.
Okay. All right. I think we're ready now. Let me just say hi to all you lovely viewers in chat, because it's so awesome to see all these familiar names. Hi, Michael. I'm going to get popcorn one of these days and just start eating it on the show, because I always crave it when I see you there with your popcorn. Hello, Alicia. Hope you're doing well. Yes, it's going to be a fascinating show, especially tonight. Wait till you hear what we got to talk about. This guy is amazing. Okay. Hello, Brian. Thank you so much for joining us. And Greg McMichael. This is going to be an exciting show. Hello, Dana. And who else do we have here? Videos from the underground.
Oh, boy.
And did I say Mary Ariette? I don't think I did. Hello, Mary. Thank you for joining us. And namaste. Namaste, namaste. I mean, you are so awesome. You always are so generous, and we truly appreciate it. So please don't think we don't, because we really do. It is amazing. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And I'm just going to echo what Dana says. Namaste. You are always so kind. And Michael, killing it. So nice of you. And don't want to forget you, W. Decker. And we will definitely have a great show, largely because of you guys. So thank you so much, W. Decker. Every ounce of this helps so much. So thank you, thank you, thank you. It's so awesome. We have such great people on our show listening in. And Aussie Jan.
Yes.
We have here Ches Evans. Can I ask, will you be interviewing? I think there's more to that. So let me
Okay.
I will let you know. Okay.
Momentary.
Jonesin for meaning. Yeah, I'm right there with you, Jonesin for meaning. Real Badger, hello. Hi, Janice.
Hey, Janice.
Very cool that you could join us tonight. And J.R. Amadeus Schiffer. And Rat Food with my favorite moniker. Thank you very much for joining us. Janie Mashburn, hello. Hope you're doing well. One Our Wedding, hello from South Carolina. Wow, we love you too, very much. Christopher Harmon, Colin Smith, what's up? Oh, this and that, having a good time, keeping busy. Just put out a new book. Oh, I should do some shameless publicity, but maybe later. CT Guitar Guy. Hey, Preston and Dolly. Yeah, thank you for joining us. And Ruth Kleiber and Chris McClucky. What does it take to get you on a call to build a website? Email me. I do have a website, but I want to switch over to WordPress. I'm on Weebly. And WordPress, I think, is the way to go if you're going to get a website. But I don't know how to do it. I looked at it. It was confusing. So, yeah, just email me, prestonufo@gmail.com. but please be patient because I am literally 200-300 emails behind. So please be patient for anyone who emails me. I am trying to catch up. I really am. Okay, Pogo Joe and Dennis Whipple, and Star Orchid, and just a Gen X dirtbag baby. $8. Oh my God.
Oh my gosh.
Thank you so much.
Oh.
Yes, Weebly does suck, and you can help. Okay, nice to hear it. All right, we better get started. Siobhan Nolan, my name is Rose, and I'm here for the first time. Oh, Rose, welcome.
Yep.
Yeah, we have a good time here. We really do. We just like to have a fun conversation. We better get started because our guest is in the green room. He's just sitting there very patiently. But let's see what his bio says. So if you have not heard of him, you should have. Just pull it up real quickly because he's a pretty major figure in this field and an honest to God scholar and researcher. I mean, he's doing some really amazing research into some of the more obscure and aspects to this field. So let me just let you know that our guest tonight is Joshua Cutchin, researcher, author of UFOs and the Paranormal. Here, let me pull up the banner real quick. So Joshua has appeared on a wide variety of paranormal programs discussing his work, including, of course, Coast to Coast and the hit History Channel show Ancient Aliens. He is the author of, wait for it, 7 critically acclaimed books. 2015's A Trojan Feast, which I actually have right here, and I totally recommend it. It's all about, well, the food and drink offerings of aliens, fairies, and Sasquatch. But quite a few other books as well. That's translated into Spanish, by the way. But 2016's The Brimstone Deceit, an in-depth examination of supernatural sense. I did a YouTube video on that. What UFO odors. There's not a lot of research into this, and he's done it. Let's see, the subtitle of that book is Otherworldly Odors and Monstrous Miasmas. I love it. Okay, what else? We have 2018's Thieves in the Night, a brief history of supernatural child abductions. So these things have been going on for a very long time throughout human history. Also, more recently, 2020's Where the Footprints End, High Strangeness and the Bigfoot Phenomena, which has 2 volumes, 1 and 2. He co-wrote this with Timothy Renner. In 2022, he released his 2-part masterwork, Ecology of Souls, a new mythology of death and the paranormal. And you may have heard Whitley Strieber talk about this, how some people have seen deceased loved ones on UFOs. I have 1 or 2 cases like that myself. Really interesting paranormal aspects to UFOs that don't get a lot of attention. So he dived deep into there. 2023 marked the release of Joshua Cutchin's first fictional novel, Them Old Ways Never Died, as well as his curated collection of essays, Fairy Films, We Folk on the Big Screen. So yeah, as you can see, he's been doing an enormous amount of research. He's been invited to speak at Georgia MUFON Events, the International Fortean organization's FortFests. That's in 2016 and 2019. X-Filers United Conference, ConCarolinas, Strange Realities Conference. I mean, he's all over the place, getting the word out. East-West Bookshop, Tewksbury Public Library, Fright Nights, Morbid Anatomy, Phenomenacon, the Worldwide Metaphysical Tribe, Midwest Conference on the Unknown, DragonCon in Georgia. That's the Archives of the Impossible, and an inquiry into anomalous experiences and the phenomena. And the last line I added on this bio because I think it's important. He's also an award-winning musician. I love anyone who loves music. So he's laughing in the green room. I see him. I'm bringing him on.
Wow, I'm so flattered. That's so kind of you to include that last line, Preston. It's kind of funny in case people don't know. I play the tuba, and I'm a classically trained tuba player who found my way to jazz and New Orleans music. So I go to my gigs and people are like, "What's up with the UFO stuff?" And then I go to the UFO conference and people are like, "What's up with the tuba?" So yeah, depending on how you want to look at it, I fit in nowhere or I'm interesting everywhere. The way you want to think of it. But it's an absolute pleasure to be here tonight speaking with y'all. Preston, I've followed your work for quite a while. You appear in quite a few of my end notes in my books, and I just really respect the work that you've done over the years. So, and Dolly, it's been great to chat with you beforehand as well. So I'm excited to be here tonight.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. Yeah, I've been following you too for a long time, just so you know. I first came to awareness of you when I put out a video on alien dreams.
I remember this. Yeah.
That was my first Not From Here book, which has now got 5 volumes. So I'm like, oh my gosh, someone has dived much deeper than I did into all of this.
That's sort of been a guiding ethos for me. And honestly, it's something that I see in your work too. I mean, I feel like we have so many UFO books that rehash some of these landmark cases over and over again. Do we really need another Roswell book? But I think we do need books about, UFOs at the drive-in and these other little things, because I suspect, I have a hunch that perhaps one of these little details that gets overlooked time and time and time again might hold the key to sort of blowing the lid off this whole thing and sort of really giving us some actual, deeper insight. So that's been one of the things that I like to do is to find that one phrase or that one data point that pops up in every UFO book and is mentioned in a sentence or maybe a paragraph and be like, okay, what happens when you roll up your sleeves and dive in and tackle that from an interdisciplinary standpoint? What can you learn about the phenomenon in general? So yeah, that's something that started with A Trojan Feast. It's a very very niche project like you alluded to, food and drink in these encounters, and it's sort of been my credo ever since then.
My goodness.
It's very cool because, in this field, it's still really new, honestly. Mm-hmm. We haven't been studying it nearly as long as most other scientific disciplines. And in the beginning, everyone's all so bent on just proving that it's actually happening. It's nuts and bolts. Anything that was vaguely paranormal or unusual or fringe got real short shrift.
Yeah.
So that's finally people are beginning to embrace some of these other more unusual aspects.
I've been noticing that. Something I've been fond of saying lately is with all this, this current disclosure season that we're in, because, these happen on a cyclical basis. In this current disclosure season, I'm seeing a lot of warming towards the paranormal topics and saying, hey, you cannot divorce these two things. Like it's baked in there in some respect. You and I, Preston, probably disagree on exactly how that is there, but we both agree that there's some sort of interplay there. And what I've been fond of saying lately is, if your disclosure doesn't include something that's really weird and confronting to your reality, not just aliens, but like confronting to what it means to exist in this reality, it's going to be a partial disclosure at best. And the more I proceed along this path, the more I see other folks involved in the disclosure movement, people who are involved in big ways in the disclosure movement, really do resonate with that as well. Like there are some fundamental questions that are going to arise alongside the broader ET question or UFO question.
Right. Okay. Well, I always like to start up the show, and I warned you because I didn't want to blindside you. I never want to blindside a guest, but it's fascinating to me that how we all ended up here. Because me, in a million years, never. I'm shy. I would never imagine I'd be going on TV or writing about UFOs and going on radio shows, and here we are doing podcast that's getting increasingly widely viewed. So
that's what the UFO does, though. It just pulls you into other places pulls you out of your comfort zone, I think. Yeah,
it sure does. It has a tendency to really wake people up to a whole new reality. Pulls you right out of the box.
For sure.
So I'm very interested in how you got involved, because I always imagine us as little kids, exploring the world, trying to make sense of everything.
Right.
I was very skeptical, so it hit me hard at age 19, 20, 21.
Yeah.
I'm curious, did you have experiences as a child? Have you seen UFOs? Have you had anything paranormal? What led you down to this path of becoming an author and researcher of these really unusual subjects?
Yeah, looking back at ourselves as little children, wondering when this child is going to ruin his or her life by getting involved in UFOs. I hesitate to say that I'm an experiencer because I haven't had anything of the UFO variety. I have had some ghost stuff winding its way throughout my life, and as we've alluded to, there may be a connection there. But as far as having a big revelatory, Saul on the road to Damascus sort of moment, I never really had anything quite like that. The earliest sort of oddity that I noticed in my life was my parents were adding on to their home, and we would find in the strangest of places a stack of 4 quarters, like on top of the fridge or like behind an old dictionary that we hadn't taken down in forever. And I don't know if that is something strange. It wasn't my parents. I talked to them about it to this day, and they're just as baffled as I am. It wasn't any of the contractors or anything, I don't think, either. And that sort of does smack of poltergeist phenomena or fairy folklore.
Well, that leads me to a question. Are you psychic? Do you know you're psychic?
No, I'm as psychically dead as a doornail. And sometimes I joke that I'm paranormal kryptonite, although that's not entirely true. So yeah, I've had some things here and there that have been highly suggestive of ghost activity. I probably saw a full-bodied apparition of a young Civil War soldier when I was in college.
Probably. What does that mean?
well, it's because I was just refreshing myself with your interview with Greg Bishop, Preston, and I was listening. I was admiring how much you hesitate to put labels on things, and I really resonate with that myself, because I can't really say that it was definitely the ghost of a Civil War boy, but I was visiting. I was in Lexington, Virginia. And we were visiting one of the homes there that was used during the Civil War as a hospital. And the stairway to get to the second floor was very narrow, so much so that like you had to go up and down single file. So one group would stay up at the top while the next tour group came up. And I came up to the top of the stairs. I was with my parents at the time. And I look into the crowd, and there is a boy, gray uniform, sunken eyes, probably my height, so 6'2"-ish, and maybe 13, 14, tall for his age. But he was wearing his Confederate uniform, and I look at him, and he didn't look strange to me. He didn't look ethereal. He just looked like a person standing there in his costume. And it's people do reenactments and stuff, and I thought maybe that was the answer for this. But as I mentioned something to my mother, I'm like, wow, did you see that kid? He was really into this. And she said, I didn't see that kid. And then I proceeded to ask everyone in my family and then everyone on the tour group if they saw him, and they said that they did not, nor had anybody at the ticket counter where you buy your tickets to gain admission. I would have been about 19 or 20. And so, so again, I the fact that no one walked by the ticket counter with in full regalia makes me think that I probably did see something that day. But every now and then these things sort of find their way into my life. So I've had some profound synchronicities. But even so, none of that really was my journey into this. I've always had an interest in these topics. But my father, I found out years later, was once subscribed to the Bigfoot Field Research Organization newsletter sometime way in the distant past. But
he saw something.
Yeah, no, it's just we were just always curious, and I was, I would check out weird books from the library, and my parents would be like, "Well, he's reading." There was never a it wasn't a household that said, don't read that, or, don't believe in ghosts aren't real. It wasn't anything like that. So I'd always had interest in a lot of these topics. Bigfoot was kind of my thing for the longest time. And then I started working, when I got my first desk job at the University of Georgia, I had a commute of about an hour, and this would have been 2012. So paranormal podcasts were starting to pop off in earnest back then. And, I was sort of listening to those and rekindling my interests. And I always, for whatever reason, in the back of my head, I'd always known about this food taboo. You did mention, Trojan Feast, my first book. I'd always heard about this food taboo in regards to the fairy folklore of Western Europe. How if you were to go to fairyland and be offered food or drink, you shouldn't accept it at any costs, right? Because you'd be stuck there forever. And you know, and I always sort of played with that as like, you know, kept that in my back pocket in case I ran into a leprechaun or something. and then I remember one birthday or Christmas, for something like that, I received a gift card to Amazon for my sister-in-law, and I said, I'm going to buy a Bigfoot book, and I bought J. Robert Alley's Raincoast Sasquatch. It's a great Bigfoot book. But I remember reading that one of the Alaskan tribes has a Bigfoot analog known as the Bequus. And it was said that if the Bequus was to give you food, you should not take the food from the Bequus because you'd be trapped with the Bequus forever. And I'm like, wow, that's really specific. And it sounds exactly like that older Western European fairy folklore. And I said, somebody should write a book on that. And I sort of sat around for a while. And I said, I guess it's me. So I did the very dishonest thing of writing that first book during the summer at my desk job because working at a university, it gets really quiet and really, really slow around the summertime. So I actually wrote that first book then, and
Wow.
you know, and I released it, and it was I really am blessed and very grateful for the reception that it got. You know, I was able to secure publication through Anomalous Books and Patrick Weege, and you know, I was reading Patrick's books in middle school. You know, so there is something really gratifying about, you know, having people that you have read your entire life saying, hey, this is actually good job, continue. So so yeah, and then as you well know, I mean, once you sort of attach the UFO or even Bigfoot or ghost thing to your name, you kind of get the side eye at job interviews. You know, it comes up eventually, and it's like, well, you got to make your own way. I never thought it would turn into a career, but as of last year, between writing and music, it actually starts to resemble something like a full-time occupation. So I'm very grateful and blessed to have stumbled into it in that way.
I have a big question for you then.
Mm-hmm.
What is your impression, your idea of how and what you understand about UFOs now? I mean, did it take you a while to convince you that they exist? I'm just curious at how you're assimilating all this knowledge that you're accumulating.
Well, so I'm a little bit hesitant because I know that Preston's big on the ETH, but I don't say this combatively. It's just where I came from. But for the longest time, even though I never really had any experiences to this effect, I was terrified of the alien abduction scenario. Just something about being paralyzed in your bed and not being able to do anything about it. I mean, that's a spooky scenario. And I know that, you know, folks like Bud Hopkins would have said that means that I had been abducted or something along those lines. But I think that the scenario has the potential to be terrifying to anyone who hasn't even been an experiencer. But I was, you know, wrestling with this. It was so profound at one point that, you know, my sister, when she got her ultrasound of my nephews, was like, don't look at them. They kind of look like gray aliens. Like, I don't want to freak you out. Like, it was almost a phobia. And it wasn't until I was in that period of listening to a lot of paranormal podcasts that the possibility of altered states of consciousness being involved in the UFO scenario raised its head. And that sort of allowed me to sort of, in my view, if altered states of consciousness play a role in the UFO experience, then there is the suggestion of some degree of sovereignty there, right? You know, not necessarily that you will fend them off, but that you have a chance to fend them off should you be involved in that scenario. And that sort of was sort of a leapfrogging for me over a lot of the extraterrestrial stuff, which I also had some personal logical problems with. And that's sort of what got me into it, is just sort of going around all that and plugging into some of these more esoteric, stranger interpretations of what lies behind the UFO phenomenon. So it was kind of a defense mechanism, actually, in hindsight.
Well, I know. I'm going to go deeper now. Here we go.
Okay.
Be ready to prepare. One of the things research demands of anybody, any type of researcher out there, is that you're looking for empirical knowledge or data, okay? And when you're researching, you have to leave how you feel about something or your preconceived ideas over there. You put them in a box, you put the lid down on it, and you let the information come into you. Because statistically speaking, the more you accumulate that knowledge without writing it with your brain over what you're thinking, lets you see more of the data as it really is.
Yes.
Okay? the view is important. Your perspective is empirically important. Okay, so how do you feel you are working with that now? I mean, has your opinion changed at all over the years? Because I'm listening to you talk and I'm hearing you say that you're not really quite convinced yet yourself at all. And I'm curious why.
Of the UFO question or of the
Yes,
EPH
all of it.
specifically?
Yeah, because it's not physical to you, it's mental. And I'm just curious.
No, well, see, here's where I think we're already stumbling across some differences in communication. I don't necessarily differentiate between mental and physical. I mean, if you look at something like psi phenomena, that's an interior phenomena that seems to interact with the physical consensus reality that we all share. Similarly, you know, one of the earliest ghost hunting methods was putting talcum powder on the floor and waiting for footprints to manifest.
We do it for ETs too.
but when people talk about ghosts, they don't think of them having this materiality, yet they can also interact with our material world. So I think it's faulty to suggest that the UFO has no physical qualities. It certainly does. Where I have kind of found myself after doing a lot of research and reading a lot of books and trying to maintain an open mind is that I suspect that the UFO does embody this dualistic reality, that and it really is a confrontation to this sort of materialist Western perspective because it does straddle that line. I suspect that human beings are predominantly physical with an important psychic component, and perhaps the UFO itself is predominantly psychic with a physical component. And I base that personal perspective of mine off of things like we were alluding to earlier, the consciousness connections, the appearance of the human dead in a lot of these experiences.
Right. Exactly.
Correlations with shamanism, correlations with altered states of consciousness. So for me, I don't think that it's even... I don't personally find the utility in trying to say, oh, it's all this or all that.
Okay.
And then you layer on top of that the fact that the UFO question probably doesn't have one answer. It's probably a multitude of answers of varying degrees of explicative power. I mean, I think that a lot of these things are misidentifications, and that's not me being negative or naysayer. I think that's just like we have, there are a lot of people.
Human perception,
right?
I love your answers to me because you're quantifying how you're bringing your perspective and what you've learned. That's what I hope to get from all our guests on the show is your deep honesty about what you've learned about all this.
Right. Well,
and there's no wrong in that whatsoever.
Well, this is what's so interesting about your research is
yes.
You're following your interest and your excitement. And I love how you dive deep into the historical cases and how they match up with current ones. Because, Jacques Vallée, of course.
Yeah, that's something that I find really interesting. I mean, so in terms of retaining that sort of objectivity, I have never in any of my nonfiction books used the first person pronoun I. It's always about here is this information. And I'm sure that there is.
Love that, yeah.
I'm sure there's a degree of sort of cherry picking that's going on because I think we all do that subconsciously in terms of our own biases. Although, I would like to think that I try to safeguard against that. But yeah, back to the UFO question specifically. Like I think that there's a large amount of it that is misidentification, and then there's that anomalous chunk, and that is the really interesting part that I think is probably a combination of unorthodox aircraft and misunderstood natural phenomena and psi phenomena and spirit phenomena, and yes, I'll even leave some room for the extraterrestrial thing as well. But I think I think one of the biggest problems that we run into as a community as a whole is trying to slap one answer on this.
Exactly.
Well, the hill that I will die on. There are three hills that I'll die on, right? The hill that I'll die on is that psi phenomena is real. Look at the work of Dean Radin. Look at the work of Daryl Bim. These are experiments that are done in really tightly controlled laboratory settings, playing by the rules that the materialist scientists want them to play by, and it's been ignored. So psi phenomena, the near-death experience, some of these encounters have such a degree of veridicality and the ability to confirm what was seen in the experience. Like that's another hill that I'll die on. The other hill that I will die on, which is a little bit more speculative, is that all these things do seem to have some sort of connection. And I don't know if that means that they're all the same thing. I don't know if that means that they're all things that are manifest or perceived in the same way through the same mechanisms. But I do think that there is some sort of connection to these things. That's a lot of the basis of where the footprints in. And my co-author, Timothy Renner, put it better than I could ever put it. You go back through some of the older Bigfoot literature and the strictly cryptozoological Bigfoot literature, where they're very adamant that this is just solely a large hairy primate in the woods. And as Tim said to me one time, he said, it's rare to see a UFO. It's rare to see a Bigfoot. How many orders of magnitude rarer is it to see both in your lifetime, or both in close proximity, or both on the same property, or both, in the same encounter?
It happens.
For them to not be connected, right? Yeah. So I think that there's some sort of connection there. To the degree that it is the same thing, I don't know. I mean, one of the things that I think about the Bigfoot mystery that I think is really important to emphasize is that you take the work of my friend Mike Cleland. I'm sure y'all know about Mike.
Mike, he's been
Mike,
on the show.
And he's such a sweetheart. I say that every time I talk about Mike. He's such a great guy. But Mike has illustrated, I think, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that UFOs and owls have some sort of connection, right? I mean, that there's some sort of connection. And if
I've experienced it. Yep.
If you look through the literature, it's all over the literature. But Mike is not going to sit here and say that every owl is a strange supernatural anomalous owl, right? There's something about the UFO phenomenon, whatever it is, that likes to appropriate that imagery, or likes to interact with actual owls and use them in some sort of way. Sometimes the owls are strange. So to the question of something like Bigfoot, you look at I could sit here and have a conversation about mid-tarsal breaks and pillow erection and dermal ridges, all this great, like, nuts and boltsy, I guess, flesh and bloody kind of Bigfoot stuff. But at the same time, I think that it's possible, because there is such a, I say that all these other paranormal / unexplained disciplines have Bigfoot envy because the evidence for Bigfoot's so great. I think that perhaps there might be a population of relict hominids out there, but the image of that flesh and blood creature is sometimes appropriated by whatever lies behind the UFO, be it ET or be it something, or stranger. So I think that we just need, it's sort of a Hallmark card at this point, but I'm not even sure that we need answers as much as we need better questions sometimes.
Or better connections.
That's what's great about your books, is you're putting all this information out. You're not saying exactly what it is. Some degree of speculation is, I think, helpful and necessary, because we have to ask questions, but we need the data. We really need the data.
I totally respect any researcher who's endeavoring to come up with something, to understand it, to quantify it, to cognitively put it out there for people in a way that they can reach in and get in your head too and see what you're saying. That's
right. And sometimes you run into these folks who are like, oh, they said this in this book, and then they said this in this book, and they seem at odds. And I'm like, no, like, throw everything against the wall and see what sticks. So treat these individual things as like these pocket thought experiments, and see if, at best, like, the most flattering thing for me is for someone to pick up on something that I suggest and then run with it. Like, that's the ultimate goal, right? Is to have someone take what you say even further and, have it outlive you in that regard. And I think that, and just being open-minded,
Exactly. I have a theme. You know what it is? I'll give you information. I'll put stuff out there, but I don't want you to believe me off the top. I want you to research what I say and prove it to yourself whether I'm onto something or not. And that's what we're supposed to do. That's what I mean by communication. You can't learn if you don't learn for yourself. You can't just be given things. It's not going to get in your head.
Right. And it's that old military intelligence adage: trust but verify, right?
Exactly.
And it's sort of an odd position for me, where I am not an experiencer to the degree that a lot of folks that I'm dealing with is. So I try to, whenever I present an alternate interpretation of what an experiencer went through, the implication is never that they're lying or that they're misled. I believe that they're relating precisely what they experienced. But I do think that it's important to sort of nest that, as Preston mentioned about some of my work, within that context of an interdisciplinary, cross-cultural, deep time depth look at these things. Because for me, that's what I just find so fascinating, is when you get a story from a farmer in Casey, Iowa, that looks just like something from an old cuneiform Mesopotamian text on the afterlife. It's like, okay, well, I doubt that this person is reading that. Perhaps they are, but to see those sort of resonances across time and across space, I think is really interesting. And that's sort of exactly what A Trojan Feast was all about, is saying, why is there a tribe in Alaska that has this exact same belief in Bigfoot, that you would see in Western Europe? And as it turns out, someday I might go back and revise that book, because it's actually a widespread belief. I find plenty of examples throughout folklore of this, but especially in some of these indigenous near-death experience traditions, especially in indigenous North America, there's that prohibition. Like, if you go to the land of the dead, don't eat the food, which I find interesting, because like the most mundane explanation for something like that is that the human collective unconscious is a real thing. Like, that's the most boring explanation of it for me, right? And I still find that fascinating, that there's some sort of software that we are all uploaded with, after we're born. Now, obviously, that's not my favorite explanation. I would prefer to believe that people are interacting with objective intelligences, and they came at these, similar prohibitions or similar rules or similar stories because everybody's interacting with the same thing. That's what I would prefer to believe. But even the most mundane explanation for what's going on there still really, I think, shakes the foundations of what we know about what it means to be human. Yeah.
It's clear, that when someone has an experience, their beliefs, the culture they're in, how they perceive it, plays a huge role in what they believe, how they interpret it. Mm-hmm. So people going throughout history, the idea of extraterrestrials wasn't really a big thing.
Yeah.
And yet here we have, all these accounts of fairies and little people and all manners of supernatural beings, which echo what we're seeing today. And I'm wondering, okay, what's going on here? Were these ETs? And they're just like, well, we never even thought of that. That's just not in our worldview. Or is it now, flipping it 180 degrees? Are we trapped in our own worldview? Are we not perceiving this correctly?
Yeah, and I don't know if you can even, objectively perceive that until you step outside of your society and culture. And that's a very tricky thing to do. The fairy, UFO occupant connection is something that I've always found really fascinating. I think some people sometimes listen to me or read my books and they kind of misinterpret it. They'll think that I'm committing to the fairies were aliens, or the aliens are fairies. And I prefer to take a third route, which is saying, I don't know really what either of these things are, but they do seem to have a consistency across time. And
you remind me of my brother. You know why? You're the prove me state. My brother was very intelligent, very well spoken, very well read, and you right. He would have if he had time. Everything had to be objectively objectified to him. In other words, it's either this or this, and until you show me what it is, I'm going to be right here in the middle wondering which way we're going with this. My brother also did not believe until he was close to the end of his life that we were consciousness and that we were indwelling our bodies. He would argue with me about it. He became very spiritual toward the end. He even started to become a priest. And he realized that we are psychic. Our higher intelligence is commanding the mind, the physical mind, not the physical mind commanding anything else. We're just using this vehicle. That's it. And so he started trying to look outside of that box and see how it all fit together. And objectively speaking, I'm going to say this to you because I've observed the same thing in you and I've observed in him. He was very, very psychic, but he refused to admit it. Either inside his mind, outside his mind, subconsciously, consciously, it would not happen. He could not do it.
You've seen a ghost. That's psychic ability.
This is my objective.
Right.
This is the point. If you're seeing these things, these energies, these parts of our universe, you have to be psychic. You have to be open to it. Your brain has to be using its equipment to perceive it. A lot of people think they're psychic and they're not. They're not using it at all, and they don't see because they're overriding it with belief systems. But for you to see it, stand there and see that guy standing there and nobody else did, you ask yourself, why can I see it? That's the question you ask.
Yeah,
How is this
you
happening?
step back from your
Yeah.
belief system. That's what happened to me. My whole belief system collapsed when I found out UFOs were real. Made me profoundly skeptical and start doing what you do. Like, let's just dig and research and step back, and let's not commit to a particular belief. Let's just try and know what we know. You know what I mean?
No, I know exactly what you mean. And I think part of my sort of aversion to that is that in other aspects of life, the people that I tend to think, I have seen a lot of people do a lot of harm by being very sure of themselves, if that makes any sense.
If you're too sure, you get knocked right off.
In politics and relationships and things like that, without sort of entertaining the possibility that one's own interpretation might be wrong. So I'm sure that's part of what you're detecting as well. My bigger question would be, why did I see that boy, and why have I not had as much stuff happen to me since then? But maybe I do have a filter that's still in place that I'm not really acknowledging.
I think we all do. I mean, it's unavoidable unless you're completely an enlightened master or something. I mean, we all have beliefs. But here, I'm going to pull this up. I just want people to see some of the books you've written so we can dive a little bit deeper into some of these. Hold on a second. Let me get that a little bit bigger. Here is A Trojan Feast. I really want to talk a little bit more about this because this is how I connected with you initially. But let me put out some of these others because you've done some amazing work. Ecology of Souls, a new mythology of death and the paranormal. This is a multi-volume set. This is really interesting, the research you've done here. And
that took a long time. Well, it actually didn't take a long time, but it was a monumental undertaking, and I'm glad I never have to write it again. Let's put it that way.
Well, I know that feeling.
Yeah.
But yeah, getting great reviews. So people are actually really digging what you're putting down here.
Well,
Companion.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Where the footprints end, High Strangeness and the Bigfoot Phenomenon. I want to dive deep into this.
Yeah.
These are beautiful covers too.
Yeah, the covers for the footprint, where the footprints end, were actually done by Timothy Renner. And I always encourage people when they're talking about picking up a copy. The Kindle version does not have the spot illustrations that Timothy also did for each chapter. So he has this wonderful style with pen and ink, and it looks great.
Very cool. Here's Where the Bigfoot Ends, Volume 2. I love that you're putting out multiple volumes because you put out a book and suddenly all the stories start coming at you. Like, well, darn it.
Yeah. Well, I wish that Ecology of Souls and Where the Footprints End weren't 2 volumes, because I think it's more expensive for people, and it asks a lot of their attention span. But at the same time, like when you tackle some of these topics, especially when they haven't had the deep dive that we were talking about earlier, sometimes you just have to do it. Sometimes you just have to do it. And with Ecology of Souls, you're just talking about death, like the biggest mystery of all, and and how it intersects with everything. And I was just going to write about UFOs and death, and then I ended up going down this line of thought with obviously the fairy connection, but you have to talk about near-death experiences, and then you're talking about shamanism, and then you're talking about ley lines, and then you're talking about ancient monuments, and it's like, oh, this all sort of has this consistent through line throughout all these things.
Yeah.
So,
and then there's this one here, Thieves in the Night, because this, people always talk about the modern day accounts, and this has been going on a while, apparently.
Yeah, you had asked me to send over any other images, and if I'd thought of it, I would have sent it to you. But the back cover of Thieves in the Night is that same image, but it's a gray in the doorway. I had contacted Sam Sheeran about doing a cover, and because I love Sam's work. And he came back to me. He's like, I'm not sure which one I should use. And I'm like, no, we're using both of them, front cover and back cover. So yeah, if anybody wants to look online, you can see.
Yeah, I want to dive into this too, because I studied the odors of UFOs and brought some conclusions of my own. So
cool.
This should be interesting to dive deeper into. And of course, here's your novel.
Yep.
Them Old Ways Never Died. Yep. Another great cover, actually.
Thank you. That was by Miguel Romero, Red Pill Junkie, who did that cover.
Well, let's start, because this is there's a lot to talk about with all of these. A Trojan Feast. That's interesting that you chose that title. It's a very catchy title.
It might have been Patrick Huige's idea for that title. It might have been his idea to name it that, and it does sort of speak to the general thesis is that there's a reason for the exchange of food and drink, and I think, as we were talking through sort of the societal and cultural ways that interacts with our expectations of these phenomena. It doesn't look like the food and drink thing happens as much in the UFO literature or UFO experiences as it does in the fairy stories. But if you sort of think about it being recontextualized in the form of injections or, tubes put down people's throats to put something into their body or something, it's still a motif that is around to this day. So the idea is that, Trojan Feast, it's somehow it's smuggling something in. Exactly what is anyone's guess, but there does seem to be for a purpose in a lot of these different experiences.
Yeah, well, I kind of touched on this in my book, Not From Here. I think it was volume 1, Alien Drinks, because I kept running across cases. I'm like, well, I don't think anyone's really talked about this.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, you have, I found out.
That's all good. Yeah, I mean,
awesome. Yeah, I mean, there was a case of these people, a family in England. They were all given drinks as they were leaving the UFO, except for the youngest. They said, well, she doesn't need one because no one's going to believe her.
Was that either the Janos people or the Avis? The Janos people. Yeah, pretty. Kudos to you for knowing that. That's a really obscure contactee book that not a lot of people talk about. That has some really interesting things to offer.
Yeah, it's got a lot of these weird kind of elements to it that make you kind of scratch your head, like, what is it? But in that book, they said, well, this is to make you forget.
Mm-hmm.
And there was another lady, Donna Butts. She had this UFO experience, and I think she saw religious figures on board. Mm-hmm. They gave her a drink, which she said healed her of bad vision.
Oh, wow. So it's, you do find that sometimes that there's some sort of, administration of food, drink, injection, ointment, I think is another thing that kind of has to enter the discussion. That does have these miraculous healing qualities. But of course, I'm preaching to the choir to you about that because that's been something that your work is focused on extensively, are these healing experiences.
Well, you mentioned ointments too, because I wrote a book on levitation, and there's some cases of witches who would apply ointment,
right?
And boom, they're off levitating.
Yeah, I mean, that was, but maybe I was going to go down sort of a salacious historical interpretation of that, but we'll leave that off. I'm going with that. But yeah, I mean, so I never would have thought. So again, embracing sort of this consciousness connection, sort of interplay between sort of our cultural expectations and all these, thinking about the UFO scenario existing in this dualistic, physical, non-physical, interacting with your expectations sort of way, allowed me to finally appreciate things like the Joe Simonton case, right? Because you hear that
alien pancakes, yeah,
you hear that, and it's often trotted out as a punchline, in non-UFO circles. The guy who got pancakes from a UFO, but once you start looking at it through that lens and also through older, fairy folklore, I was really surprised to find that anybody who doesn't know, thumbnail sketch, Joe Simonton, Eagle River, Wisconsin, 62, I think maybe, 1962, I think. He hears a sound outside. He goes outside. There are these little beings who are frying up these cookies or pancakes, and he gives them fresh water, and they give him these cookies or pancakes that taste awful. Volet had drawn comparisons to the fairy stuff in terms of the lack of salt content with these buckwheat pancakes that were analyzed, and salt was, of course, was harmful to the fairy folk. But I also found a reference to a race of dwarves on an island in the folklore of an island that's off the coast of Germany, where they would come help farmers in the fields by bringing them pancakes in exchange for fresh water. I'm like, oh, that's so specific. And I really wish I'd had the time, focus, or resources to look into Joe Simonton's genealogy and see if maybe his family came from that region, and if that was some sort of memory that's echoing through time there. But yeah, so yeah, and I've since come to really embrace and love that story, because you hear these interviews with Simonton, and he's so earnest, and
it's a true case. I have no doubt about it, because there were outside witnesses that saw stuff at the time he described it. His brother was a character. I think it was his brother was a character witness. Those pancakes were analyzed twice by the Air Force, who showed great interest, and I think it was the FDA.
Yeah, and they're still on display outside the canteen of like Right Pat or something. There's a little project. There's a little Project Blue Book case. You can find it online. It might not be Right Pat, but it's one of these Air Force bases that still has one of the Simonton pancakes on display. You know, I feel like Indiana Jones. It belongs in a museum. But yeah, and you know, it also has that high strangeness element, which I just, whenever I hear, I'm perhaps that's why I'm so attracted to high strangeness, is because, you know, I do talk to people who have had experiences, and some of them are very conventional, and I hear their conventional experiences that conform to something you would have heard about through cultural osmosis or on TV or something, and I find it very interesting and compelling. But I always lean in a little bit closer when people say, yeah, and one of the gray aliens was wearing a shirt that said, "I heart New York." Some sort of really strange detail. I'm like, why would you make that up? You know,
they don't.
Yeah.
It's my experience that in working with the ETs and contacting people, they pay attention to cultural norms. And the native peoples of this country always have the ingredients of fry bread or pan bread on them, and they will exchange it for goods. This is a way of working to not starve to death on a long trek, okay? Or to meet another group and you have detente with them. ET is very well aware of this, and they act similarly. And so you'll get a lot of, and you call it high strangeness because it seems out of the norm. It is very much in the norm for what area they're in. So when you hear weird things, look at the culture of the people that they're interacting with, their history, and then ask yourself, are they trying to fit in? Are they trying to have detente with them? Are they trying to show them that they're friendly, happy people, and they just want to be with you? Okay?
That's an excellent point. And, you know, short of folks like RD6 Killer Clark, I think that ufology and to a greater degree cryptozoology are not appreciative enough of a lot of indigenous traditions and what that has to say about these phenomena. You know, it's really bad in cryptozoology, because they'll take all these notes about a tribe's belief in Bigfoot, and then once they get to the part about Bigfoot disappearing, they'll be like, oh, these primitive people believe that Bigfoot can disappear. Like, they're completely on board until it passes their boggle threshold, right? And then they're like, oh, well, they're wrong about that, but everything else we'll take and believe them. So I think that, you know, a lot of these cultures need to be listened to.
UFO field suffered bad from that. Initially, they wouldn't even accept humanoid reports. Don't want to hear about them. It's like, what?
Right.
Retrievals, of course, were ignored for the longest time. Now they're considered really the forefront, or at least one of them.
Right, and you know, and it's interesting. It's been interesting to see how the field has sort of integrated these ever expanding frontiers, and what it's been. I say this in a way that I'm being very charitable. I love this, being more sympathetic to these peculiar ideas, and I think that speaks to, quite frankly, the actual nature of the phenomenon. I mean, how it starts to encompass a lot of these things that you never thought it would, and how it does push the boundaries of what you will accept as being true or not.
Yeah, well, no, I ignored Bigfoot for the longest time until I got a Bigfoot case. It happened to be a Bigfoot UFO case, integrated together. UFO lands, next night it's Bigfoot, then it's a poltergeist outbreak. So I'm like, okay, so I investigated UFOs and ghosts and near-death experiences and Bigfoot and demonology and angels. I mean, I went down that road because, like you say, you have to if you want to understand what's going on here.
Like we were talking about earlier, it pushes you beyond your comfort zone. It consistently does that. You know,
I'm constantly uncomfortable now.
I mean, yeah. A thing that I've had to start like trying to find. Well, that's part of the reason that I wrote Ecology of Souls, is because, you know, I would hear these stories about pre-birth memories in ET, and I'd be like, oh, I don't know what to do with this. Not from like a deep-seated like ideological revulsion, but I just didn't know how to fit it into the whole thing. But, you know, similarly, something else that I've actually kind of started taking a little bit more seriously lately are reports of Dogman. Not that I laughed it off, but, you know, again, the perspective was that there's a flesh and blood dog human dog hybrid out there. And it's like, well, evolutionarily, that doesn't make a lot of sense. But you know, at the same time, the people who push back against whatever is out of their comfort zone when they deal with these topics, they aren't talking to people, right? You know, I remember distinctly, I had a conversation with a woman who was very well put together, well balanced, you know, completely normal. Didn't want me to divulge her identity, but she was, I believe she had a civil servant job. And she confided in me that she was driving home one night, and on her driveway, she sees this cat person just step out from behind a tree and walk across the road. And,
Wow.
you know, it's, you know, I can't say what that is, but like, there's nothing about her. You know, she wasn't broadcasting it to anybody. She wasn't saying, put my name in a book. She wasn't doing anything like that. Like,
Give
she
me
was
money
just,
and I'll tell you my story.
yeah. She just wanted someone to you know, bounce this experience off of. And, you know, I've always find those moments really confronting, where it's like somebody's being really vulnerable with you and telling you something that's just completely odd. And, you know, again, I would rather entertain 9 fabricators or liars than to dismiss one person who's had a genuine experience. And honestly, like, even when it's misidentification or there's mental illness involved, dismissing those people makes me feel uncomfortable too, because the trauma in those experiences is still real. You know, even if it wasn't exactly what they thought they saw, the trauma is as real as if it was. So that doesn't mean that I have to give equal weight to every experience, but it does mean that I have to listen and be respectful of it, because I don't think that there are enough people who are advocating for experiencers nowadays.
Have you ever had a case that you felt compelled to completely vet this person and vet their story and dive very deeply into them?
Well, my approach has typically been to not put all of the weight on one particular story. So what I tend to try to look at when I do my writing is I tend to try to look at trends, right? So
Okay.
if I'm noticing a story where fruit was given, to use a Trojan Feast example, where fruit was given in an encounter, I'm less concerned about the granularity, about going in and being granular with the authenticity of every encounter. I'm less concerned with that and more concerned with saying, here are 10 examples of this. So if 4 or 5 are not true, then, well, it still is, you know, a loose trend.
I just found another, by the way, lady from Russia. Said, you know, this is just her account. It's not, I can't vet it to the degree I'd like to, but she says she was given strawberry/pineapple type fruit. And yeah, there's these weird fruit examples, case after case.
Yeah, I think there's a hybrid pineapple strawberry and a Trojan Feast too. This reminds me of something, and I'd be interested to see if you have noticed this too, y'all, is the flavor of encounters differs widely from culture to culture, in terms of a lot of the stuff that you hear from these former Eastern Bloc countries is not the sort of stuff that you would get in America in terms of the narrative, right? It tends to, in my experience, have a lot more fantastic elements. I mentioned Miguel Romero, a friend of mine who did the cover for Them Old Ways Never Died. He lives in Mexico City, and I talked to him once, and I said, do you notice there's a distinct change in, I don't even want to say the sensationalism, but in terms of the amount of high strangeness that you find in some of these Latin American reports? And he said, yes, he said, as a resident of Mexico, like, I notice it too, because, you know, he's involved in keeping abreast of the UFO scene. It's like, it's almost as if these things tend to manifest a little bit in more heightened ways depending upon the cultures. Have you noticed that too,
Yeah.
y'all? Or?
Well, I mean, look at the airship wave of the late 1800s to the early 1900s, which was so unusual and never happened again.
Right? It's a one-off. It's a one-off experience or a one-off flap. Yeah.
There's the Swedish ghost rockets, the Foo Fighters. I mean, there's clearly a lot going on here. I think a lot of stuff gets put under the UFO umbrella that shouldn't be labeled as ET. We love names. We love labeling. I think it helps us understand.
In my experience with people, cultures around the globe, okay, I have noticed that when there's less fear in the individual, but there is a more of a cultural thing going on in their minds, and they're listening to themselves think. And in their perspective, they are so grounded in a belief system that includes high strangeness that they will amplify what they see in their minds.
Yeah.
It's almost like emotional pareidolia on top of what they're actually
I
seeing.
love that. I love that emotional pareidolia. Yeah, I really love
And
that. I
there's
mean,
a cultural censoring going on too. People will, perhaps in the United States, will not talk about the high strangeness aspects of it.
Right.
They're like, well, they're not going to believe me.
right.
They're not going to believe me. I'm not talking about this.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's and you look at the work of like Artie, or you look at the work of Cynthia Hind, and sort of how they were sort of bringing up these questions in the context of that indigenous setting, and sort of once you start asking the right questions, you start getting some answers. And yeah, I think that's really interesting. I love that emotional pareidolia.
I want to bring something. You brought it up earlier. I'm going to finish. I want to give you something. You can add this into your perspective.
Okay.
Native Americans consider themselves star children. Okay, they are of the people, and they have many totems. They have many spirit animals. They have many guides. Okay, and in their culture, in their system of belief systems, these animals represent different values of each animal interjected into how they're perceiving and what it means to them. Owls come from that. And in this country, owls exploded in Native American culture and history, and it spread out into everybody else in this country. I watched it happen. I saw it in the histories. I've seen it on the other side of this fence. Okay. And ET does not mind employing, when they come to you, they can read your mind. It's not a joke. It's real. They're wide open psychic, and they hear everything you think. Mm-hmm. They're expert at suggesting to you, like hypnotists, to see something coming from your own mind. That gives you more safety in your own mind to experience with them. The Native peoples in this country have experienced that in a degree that you might not get yet. Okay, these are real encounters with beings who help them understand their life and why they're here and what's going on from a level of perspective of understanding. Their educational level from very early on in our history up until now is very, very finite, okay? And that's what this is. So when people, us all around here, start seeing owls too, they're playing into that, and they're helping you not be terrified of them at all. They want to communicate with you. They want to have an interaction with you. And this is how they accomplish it without you dropping dead in front of them, literally.
Right.
Okay, we have to take a station ID break. Thank you, Louise, for reminding me.
Thank you, Louise.
All right, everyone. I just want to let you know that you are watching The Light Gate. This is episode 46. I'm your host, Preston Dennett. My lovely co-host is Dolly Safran. Our guest tonight is Joshua Cutchin. We've been talking about all kinds of really interesting things, including his book, mostly. We've been talking about this, A Trojan Feast, but all different subjects, from Sasquatch to Faeries to, oh my gosh, I mean, I can't even summarize. We've been bouncing around quite a bit all over the place, but let me just say that we are streaming live on United Public Radio Network 107.7 FM in the beautiful city of New Orleans, Louisiana. Also, the UFO Paranormal Radio Network at 105.3 FM. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Also streaming on YouTube and Facebook. And if you have Roku, we are there too. We have one more hour left. Well, a little bit less, but quite a bit. I'm lining up all your guys' questions and comments that I want to pop on the screen at some point. So thank you very much. I do see them. But yeah, we are having all kinds of fun with our guest tonight, Joshua Cutchin, author of so many books. I'm hoping we can at least touch on all of them. But let's see if we can wrap up this Trojan Feast and move on to some of the others before it gets too late. So I've got a couple of questions about, this book. I actually had an experience where I was on board and given a drink. Mm-hmm. This was my experience, and it was a kind of kiwi lime tasting, very syrupy drink. And next thing I knew, boom, I'm back home. This was a genuine onboard experience for me. That's my perception of it. But I'm wondering, Whitley Strieber talked about, he was given a bitter drink. People have all these different flavors and ideas of what this is for. I'm wondering what's your take on it? What are like some of the early cases? What's the most interesting case? I mean, is there anything else you want to add that we haven't talked about yet?
Well, I would ask in regards to your own experience, that sweet flavored drink, at the time and in hindsight, would you qualify that as a positive or negative experience, or neutral?
Positive. It was very positive. I was so excited. Yeah.
So there's something interesting that I've found is that you don't often find sweet drinks and negative experiences, or bitter drinks and positive experiences. There seems to be some sort of consistency between the way that the drink tastes and the experience that you're having. So naturally, if you look at the old 1950s, 1960s contactee experiences, it's all like the best food ever. And then the 70s and 80s rolls around, and with these, when we shifted from contactees to abductees, that's when you started getting nasty tasting things and stuff like that. I mean, as far as the purpose, there does seem to be some sort of explicit mention in a lot of these experiences of having amnesia-inducing qualities. That does seem to be part of it. I think we would be remiss, very much in alignment with what Dolly was saying a moment ago, that there is a heavy symbolic element at place when you are exchanging food and drink. There's, not to make a semi pun, but there's a sense of communion going on there.
Exactly.
And to that end, there is this interesting sort of religious motif that you find across a lot of different cultures of eating the god. And of course, the easiest example to point to would be Christian communion, but there's also a belief amongst various populations that if you consume the flesh of your slain enemy, you'll take on their attributes, or you can this sort of transmissible quality of attributes from eating things. And I wonder if that's not sort of playing a role in this, either literally or symbolically. And I say literally because if you look at the work of Credo Mutwa, who said, Credo Mutwa said a lot of things, but John Mack took him seriously, and I think he had some interesting, insightful things to say. He was involved in an interview at one point where he discussed people that he was with killing and consuming. Tindane, one of the basically the Greys is if you listen to his descriptions, that's the way they sound like. And he said that it was this transcendent experience that was, he's basically describing a psychedelic experience, right? And you put that up against some of these traditions where these entheogens, these psychoactive substances that are used in shamanic, journeying and whatnot, sometimes they're explicitly conceptualized as a part of the body of a deity. So I think something like that is going on in that context as well. So as far as like what was going on in your specific encounter, I'm not sure. But I'm not always certain that the exchange of food and drink is for hospitality or for sustenance. Like, it seems like there's some sort of ulterior motive at play in a lot of these encounters.
There is an ulterior motive. I can witness it to you. Mm-hmm. It is not evil in any way, shape, or form. ETs have been involved with humankind from the beginning of our history and before. And basically right now, there's a lot going on with our solar system, our planetary system, and our sun and our magnetosphere as well. And we're taking heavier from about 100 years ago, 1859, a little over that, till now, we're taking heavier and heavier loads of gamma radiation. And I want to give you a correlator before I say this to you. When we get radiation poisoned by bombs and things like that, we take sodium iodide pills, iodine. Mm-hmm. Okay. And it helps us to get it to not hurt us and go through our system so that we can release it and get it out as fast as we can. radiation is radiation. There are different kinds of radiation byproducts, like, whatever kind of bomb is coming at us. But the sun, specifically, in all stars and electromagnetic current sheets, everything, all of it is based gamma radiation, and it kills life, period. It disassembles your DNA, period. Okay. Since we're taking these loads, you've watched from history where we have loads more cancer, loads more autoimmune disorders, loads more mental disorders, heart disorders. I mean, the list is unbelievable. ET has known this, and it is not they don't abduct you. They contact you, and they have literally been holding the human race up. We started having low sperm counts because of the civilization we were living. They were trying to work with that too. The drinks that you get, and here's where you're absolutely correct, it is to give you something to think about other than that specific topic. They don't want you to be afraid. That's the last thing they want, but they are trying to heal you of gamma radiation poisoning to stop you from dying very quickly. So that we don't annihilate our entire planet of people. That's why they hover over nuclear facilities, and they're trying to show, stop it. We can turn it off. Why don't you? Okay.
Maelstrom, yeah.
It's a lot of interesting commonalities to these drinks. Some are like neon pink. One guy, he had an ET. I'm assuming it's ET because, I am a believer that this is the explanation for certainly some of these. I want to go there because that's my assessment, right? But he believed it was ET, but it was this neon pink liquid that because he was suffering from this chest cold that wouldn't go away, and they're like, drink this.
And it cured him of it. Yeah,
the chest cold. But yeah, some are nourishment, some are healing, some are apparently to forget. Some look, I don't know, some medical.
They tell you
something that you mentioned there, Dolly, that I would really like to highlight personally too, is that I grow weary of the negative contact perspective, and I think that I'm not saying that all experiences are pleasant, you know what I mean? But even when they're unpleasant, they tend to have a trajectory toward, in my experience, they tend to have a trajectory towards something positive.
Right. Well, I can tell you that I'm a nurse, okay? I don't work anymore. I'm 66 years old this year, okay? I don't need to do that anymore. But as a nurse, one of the things that you learn rather quickly, I mean, you're trained for it, is nobody's going to like you there. Nobody's going to be happy that you're jabbing them, stabbing them, sewing them, giving them medicine that tastes like crap. Excuse my French. Sorry. You know what I'm saying?
Precisely.
It's experience. Humans are taught to fear everything from birth up. Okay. So you get these little 1-year-olds, 2-year-olds in an emergency room who are about to drive everybody insane, rip you, tear you, punch you, smack you, whatever, whip the blood, the needle away from you. They'll do anything to get away from you. They scream at the top of their lungs. But it's not just the 2-year-olds. It's the 50-year-olds, the 20-year-olds. They bite, they scratch, they punch, they do all kinds of, and they spit on you, and they hate you. Now, I want to tell you something. I'm on both sides of this fence. I'm a nurse. I'm also an ET contactee who can fly. And I've seen this happen on board. I have been hurt on board by another human being because he didn't like us at all. Okay, period. This is not a joke to me. And it shouldn't be a joke to humankind. We fear everything. What is up with that? Think about it. And I think the negative emotional response is just that. You've been taught to fear. You're bloody dead in it, and you can't see any forest for the trees at all. Your blinders are on. Your mechanisms are strong, and you react. And that's all you can think about. But Preston,
I want to give a shout out real quick to Heidi Hansen for the super sticker donations.
Oh my God.
You are unbelievably generous and awesome.
Oh my God. Yeah. Wow.
It's very, very cool. So
Preston has done work. Preston has done work where they take people who have had negative experiences and they say, let's think about this. Let's have a workshop together. Let's talk it out. Let's go over every inch of this. And you tell me when it was scary. You tell me when it was this and that. And you let them revisit it in a calm place and then realize that they weren't harmed, that there was no jabbing needles, that there was da-da-da-da-da. Okay.
Right.
And they wake up and they go, oh. And if these are contactees who have multiple contact, and the next one they come back and they say, guess what? It wasn't that bad.
Bigfoot encounters are the same way too.
I understand. Yeah.
People have this incredible fear of Bigfoot.
Yeah. I mean, it's always those with Bigfoot, it's always those one-off encounters of hunters or people driving the cars at night. They're the people who are always like, it's a giant monkey and it wants to kill me. Like that's like the constant refrain. And then once you talk to people who are habituators who have Bigfoot on their property, then they they fall more in line with this longitudinal perspective that we've been talking about. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Cool.
Dune, fear is the mind killer. Literally.
Yeah.
That's a very good thing to say.
Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. Okay, so we're pretty much covered the food and drinks. What are some of the food and drinks that you have researched? Any other weirdly unusual foods or drinks that you want to touch on before we move on to maybe Bigfoot or one of these other paranormal odors? That one interests me as well.
Yeah, there was a series of experiences in France in the 1970s that involved this like chocolatey sort of substance, but of course, it's like chocolate but wasn't chocolate. There was I know
one case. Yeah, a guy's mopeding along.
Yes, exactly.
So eat this. It looks like a chocolate bar. He ate it. It wasn't chocolate.
Yeah, it made him sort of drowsy and awoke in his apartment. And if you look across the stories, you do find the references to like this sort of like nasty candy, like the candy that you don't want in your trick or treat bucket. Yeah. So I just say, if off the top of my head, that's some of the strangest stuff is the stuff like that. But again, like especially in that French case that we just mentioned, there was a sort of a cause and effect associated with it. He ate it, he felt drowsy, he woke back in his apartment. So yeah. But I mean, there are some speculative implications that we could talk about. But if you want to get to anything else, we might need to move on.
Yeah, well, I'd love to touch on this because this is fascinating to me. The Brimstone Deceit, an in-depth examination of supernatural sense, otherworldly odors, and monstrous miasmas.
Yeah,
I like that.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a long-winded subtitle. The title it's the hardest thing to name a book on supernatural smells, and I'm not sure. Like the Brimstone Deceit, I still think sounds like it belongs in a Christian Science reading room. You know what I mean? Like it sounds like it's brimstone and the devil, but really it's just an allusion to the recurring odor of sulfur that pops up in these cases, which is noted time and time and time again. And part of what was fun to do with that was to provide a recontextualization of what sulfur is. Like we associate sulfur with demons and the devil and stuff like that. But if you look through not only the historical record, but also the Bible, it's always presented as a fumigant. Like, to this day, if you're using an acne medication, it contains sulfides to help, clear up your acne. It's a cleansing. It's a cleansing chemical. It's a cleansing substance. And a lot of the allusions in again in the Bible, if you're talking about brimstone, you're talking about the devil, so you have to talk about the Bible. It's the allusion to God's breath smelling like sulfur in this cleansing capacity. And the reason that the devil smells like sulfur is because he's been tossed into the lake of fire as a way of cleansing. So really sort of recontextualizing exactly the purpose and our overall cultural connotations with sulfur and how it smells like, decay and rot, but how it also means a lot of different things. And
it smells like boiled eggs. You've been to Florida a lot. Haven't you been to Sulphur Springs in Florida? There's like 7 of them.
Yes. Right? Well, so sulfur does and doesn't smell like rotten eggs. So hydrogen sulfide is actually the
well, that's the brimstone smell. Yeah, that's the burning smell.
Right.
So, yeah.
But it gets really difficult in some of these cases, especially the older cases where they'll say, "Oh, I smelled sulfur," and you're like, "Okay, well, did they smell hydrogen sulfide or did they smell sulfur dioxide, which is the gunpowder fireworks smell?"
Exactly.
And so you have to sort of go through these cases and take a look at other clues as they're describing it. Like, so hopefully they'll say something like, "Yeah, it smelled like fireworks, like sulfur," and they're like, "Okay, then now I know what they're actually describing." But otherwise you're kind of left guessing. But this sulfurous odor, regardless of which compound we're talking about, is something that appears in all sorts of different all sorts of different cases, from the ghost stuff to the UFO stuff to the Bigfoot stuff as well. What I think is really interesting about sulfur compounds is that we are hardwired to detect them. Natural gas is actually odorless. The thiols are added in afterwards to make us, aware of it being odoriferous.
Yes.
But the human ability to detect sulfur compounds is 0.5 parts per billion, and to put that in perspective, one drop of ink in a tanker truck is twice that amount. Right. So
wow.
Yeah, so like if you're trying to be stealthy, these beings, whatever they are, in either of these separate disciplines, they couldn't have chosen a worse compound to smell like. So and they seem to control so many other things about the experience. How can they not control how they smell? So it seems to me implies that there's some sort of like attention grabbing mechanism there, or some sort of, quite frankly, and I don't mean this necessarily in a negative way, some sort of manipulation in terms of interfacing with memory and the way that these odors are generated. I mean, it's
no.
It's
not just sulfur either. I mean, people describe all different kinds of odors.
Yeah, that's the other misgiving about the Brimstone Deceit, is it sounds like it's just about sulfur, and I go into a lot of different odors. I mean, again, sometimes the problem is that these are really vague. People will say that, the UFO smelled like chemicals, and it's like, well, everything is a chemical. But sometimes they'll be a little bit more specific, and they'll say ozone, and they might describe a purple or bluish light, which suggests that there's some sort of photoelectric reaction going on there.
Have you ever wondered what plasma is and how it burns and what burns in it, and how plasma turns colors in different elements and things like that, and the different odors you can get off of plasma as it's burning? Imagine a craft coming down from space into our atmosphere, and it's going through a polluted environment. We have sulfur, carbon dioxide, we have sulfates from manufacturers floating around in the air, and 1,000 other different chemicals in our atmosphere. Okay. And it's burning plasma as it comes down, because its environment is totally enveloped in a plasma field. Okay. You can't, the energy they use is so hot, it goes to past 17,000 degrees. So it's burning anything that it comes in contact with. Okay. And these people are seeing them come down, or they don't see them come down, but they've come down somewhere near them, and they have experiences. They'll land and hover way away and then come in close to where you're at, but they stink from it. Okay. And they get associated with demons. They walk the field of it, and they are layered in it.
Well, and, what's more demonic than what we've done to the environment, right? I mean,
exactly.
I found some really interesting scholarship by this gentleman named Antonio F. Rulon, who sort of broke down the different possibilities, and one of those was the one that you had mentioned, is that the source of the the source comes from the environment, and the cause comes from the environment, or the source comes from the environment, but the object causes it, or sort of breaking it down into these different possibilities. So I mean, that's those are all excellent points, and there does seem to be, in a lot of these, that's the thing that I think is most interesting about odors in general, is that it does imply that there's some sort of reaction going on, and that's worth taking note of. Yeah,
Thomas Bullard, I think he did the forward for your book on A Trojan Feast, and I think he was the first to list cases specifically that had odors in them, and that's what caught me to take a deeper look at it. I thought,
that sounds like something he would have done. Yeah,
and I collected like 50 cases of it.
And, I have nothing but good things to say about his scholarship, and I wish that he was more of a household ufological name than he is. So it's called the Brimstone Deceit. It's about all sorts of different smells. Sometimes they're organic smells, sometimes they're smells of ammonia is another really common one. So what I eventually sort of found, and I'm not entirely sure how strong this trend is, but you have to end a book with some sort of speculation, right? There's always got to be a what if part. A lot of the odors I perceived in a lot of these different cases, if we're going to lump all these things together, as being falling into two categories. One of which is the sulfur compounds and everything else. But what's interesting about that everything else category is that they tended to be a category of odors known as trigeminal stimulants. And the trigeminal nerve is the largest nerve in the human face. You're being a nurse, you probably know this. And it's the mechanism by which smelling salts
The
wake up.
olfactory nerve, yes.
So it was kind of interesting to see if maybe there's some sort of interaction at play with that. That there's
Well, and also smells play such a powerful role in memory.
Right. I mean, that's the thing, and I think it was Terrence McKenna who mentioned that the camouflaging and color changing and texture changing of octopi was something akin to telepathy, right? And I think that an even more sophisticated form of telepathy would be something like smell, because I mean, you with telepathy, there's this implicit, having never experienced telepathy myself, so please be charitable with this interpretation, but like there has to be a degree of understanding going on, whereas with smell, like you cannot help it. Like you will smell your deceased father's cologne and all these memories will come back. You can't push them out. You can't resist at all. Like it will wash right over.
Human beings can also smell states of being in each other. You can smell when you're drunk. You can smell fear. You can smell hate, anger, all of it. We are highly sensitized beings. Like dogs are. They're way above it because they're more attached to their brain with it. They can identify more than we can. We sort of dummy down from
a shark can smell a drop of blood in a perfect-sized pool.
Well, that's something that I think is really interesting is that, there's this sort of like trope that our pets can see the supernatural. They can see spirits and they can see ET or whatever. And I'm like, can they see them or can they smell them? Right? Because their smell is so finely tuned. Yeah.
You can both. I will tell you something. Preston knows this. He's going to verify it. When I talk to him about things that go on and occur, one of the things that I've experienced with the tall grays is that they huff each other. When they greet, they put their foreheads together and they inhale each other.
And I've heard this in other cases too.
Yeah, they greet that way. And first time it happened to me, I was 5 years old and I was like, and so I smelled back. And it taught me something. I could actually.
We're racking up the questions, guys.
That's
communicate this way. Yes,
that's super interesting to me because it does imply like smell as a communication.
Part of communication.
Yeah.
You have 6 senses. You're psychic. You can touch, smell, sense, taste, all of it. Okay, see, and it's one of your senses. And if you're not operating all of them, you're not operating properly. Period.
Right.
And so you've made a very profound discovery. I mean, I don't know if you realize it or not, but you drew the right conclusion. Absolutely right.
Yeah. Does this get to Bigfoot too? Bigfoot's all about the stinky scent.
Oh man, yeah. And the interesting thing about these Bigfoot cases is that I've found plenty of them. Obviously, it's not a hard and fast rule, but there are lots of cases where they'll say the smell switched on or the smell switched off,
and it's just not even there. Yeah, I mean, so many cases.
Yeah,
the Bigfoot doesn't smell.
Right there are those examples too, and so you end up sort of going down the garden path of like, well, do apes have scent glands, and if they do, how voluntary are they? And there's some apocrine scent glands that gorillas have that smell like burning rubber. And again, burning rubber, we think about burning rubber tires, and that's part of the vulcanization process, which again involves sulfur. So it's like this circular cyclone rabbit hole.
Okay. Well, can we go to some of the questions now?
Certainly.
Because I want to get to them because we always end up, not answering all of them because the questions seem to come late for some reason.
I'm going to ask you right now. You're coming back, okay? I'm serious. That's serious. Okay.
Liz Evans, good evening, President. Can I ask you, will you be interviewing Kaz Clark? I just got connected to her, so there's a distinct possibility. Can't say yes for sure, but I sure hope so. Okay, let me see. UFO Bigfoot says, Where are the Footprints and 1 and 2 are my favorite paranormal books ever.
Thank you, UFO Bigfoot.
So I just wanted to pop that up, Joshua, because it's always a warm, fuzzy feeling when people say something like that.
It is. it means I'm not shouting into the void. Which is always
right.
Sure.
Some of these are just comments, but music is life. So yeah, I always have an extra level of respect for people who dive deep into music.
I think music is I don't the older I get, the less I differentiate between music and entheogens, and psychedelics. It's like instant emotional mental change on demand. Yeah.
There's another book there, I'm sure.
Oh yeah.
All right. Eric Red says the goddess ate the 6 pomegranate seeds in Hades.
Yeah, a lot of anthropologists will tell you that, oh, this food taboo and why it's so widespread is because of the Persephone myth, where she would, consume the pomegranate seed and she was trapped in the underworld. And that's all fine and good when you're dealing with Eurasia and even Africa, but you're seeing these same motifs from the Americas and from Oceania. So again, we're looking at collective unconscious, international ancient civilization, or objective interactions with these beings. Like, those are your 3 options, I think.
Exactly.
Like Eve eating the apple too. I mean, it goes all the way back to.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
I guess. All right. Here is another one from Debbie Joyce. Have you ever heard of an opalescent, larger than a gray being with large eyes?
Well, I mean, there is, that in a lot of different stories you will hear about there sort of being the drones and there being the larger supervising.
The eyes seem to play a big role in a lot of supernatural creatures.
Yeah. And I'm not entirely sure that, there's been some interesting research that's been done with people under the, speaking of pharmacological altered states of consciousness, people who are in laboratory settings, give administered substances and then stare into each other's eyes, and there's an increased amount of telepathy in those encounters as well. And that's, of course, what you hear in a lot of these stories is that they get up in your face and impart emotions, messages, etc. So there's something about eyes in general that I think is worth exploring.
Yeah. All right, I'm just going to whip through these because I've got 24.
Oh, geez. Okay.
Up. Some of these are comments. Preston, please do more vlogs of inside crashed ships from New Zealand. Oh, gosh. I don't know if I know of any crashed UFOs in New Zealand, but...
Oh, there's got to be a UFO crash in New Zealand. There's a UFO crash everywhere.
I'm telling you. I wrote books on 5 different states. They all had UFO crashes in them. So we'll see. All right. Here is an interesting comment. UFOs are a daydream believer from a different level of consciousness, a different realm, perceiving reality in a different way. Well, that's very esoteric and philosophical.
I like it, though. Sounds like a lyric. I like it.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's exactly what we've been talking about. Okay, Janice Cunningham. ETs seem to like, what is your highest excitement? I heard a spiritual aphorism, always follow your excitement. And I've always remembered it. If you're not here having fun, what are you doing?
I like that.
So I'll just, not really a question there, I guess. Okay, I'm sure there are some of these questions here. This is another comment, sorry, but I found it interesting. Eric the Red says, the flying saucer can range from a beater truck to a high-end Lamborghini.
It definitely sounds like that.
Cultural perception again.
Mm-hmm.
Does he mean speed? In other words, they can move like a truck, or
no? I mean the different shapes and styles.
Oh, okay, all right.
Which is, I mean, all over the world, it's different.
Okay.
Okay. Here's a Bigfoot ET. I think ETs bring the Bigfoot here. Can I be that wrong?
There are stories, and there are indigenous stories to that effect. So it's certainly worth entertaining. Yeah.
All right. I promise you there's some really good questions here coming up if I can find them. I put stars of these because I was just interested.
No, it's great.
All right. Jones and for Meaning says, it's so weird to me because I developed a very unusual allergy to buckwheat after being hypnotized to quit smoking. What's with the buckwheat?
Yeah, I don't know if I have an answer for that. It seems to me like maybe the hypnotist might have been kicking around in the old noggin a little bit too carelessly.
As a nurse, I can tell you that any wheat that you eat in this country, you're subject to gluten problems.
Yeah.
And gluten allergies are serious, and buckwheat can give you a gluten allergy like you can't believe. So yeah.
Okay, I see some real questions here. Here's a case I talked about once. The Flying Saucer restaurant. People were driving along and stopped at what they thought was a restaurant.
Yep, I love this one. Yep.
Was not a restaurant. They don't think it was.
Yeah, I love that story.
I've actually seen Sasquatches go invisible on different occasions. I have one case where I interviewed someone who said that. I am a huge believer that this is more than just a flesh and blood primate wandering around.
Right. And you talk to the cryptozoologists, and the lion's share of them will say, well, you were wrong. You're crazy. you know, and it's just, that's not a productive thing to say, you know.
Has anybody ever studied bonobo behavior? It's a small gorilla from South
I'm sure
America.
they must have.
Well,
Right.
they're not like regular gorillas. They're empathic. They are loving. They have family units. They act like us. They're more human to us than gorillas are, and they share more DNA with us than an actual gorilla does. And if you can think of that, think of what a Bigfoot might be to you. Okay, we all have DNA. We're all one or two genes off one another. You have more banana DNA in you than you do, horse DNA or whatever, dog. It is amazing to me that people don't think about this, that we're all communicating with one another. We're all depending on each other. The ecosystems of humanity and everything else depends on each other. The system is very volatile. It can balance the wrong way or go wrong and things become extinct. These and I would say animals, we're animals, okay? And if they're sentient, you have to give it a chance to think about what they're capable of, not violence, not anger, not hurt or whatever. And if they're avoiding us, it's because they think we're the ones with the problem. Think about that,
All right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm about to get to the good questions now. Those are mostly comments. But here's an actual question from Victor Lindberg. It's probably up more your alley, Dolly, but I think we all have a comment on this. Why do most ET have one-piece suits and boots? Is it military? I hope they have better fashion on their home planet. That speaks to what the fairies wear too. I mean, because right, or the different supernatural beings have different outfits.
Yeah, it's always interesting to me. This idea of looking specifically at the fairy folklore is that, when we see little people in modern accounts, they're oftentimes dressed in attire from the Middle Ages. Except in the Middle Ages when they were dressed in contemporary attire, right? Like it's like, so what is it about this fashion getting frozen in time, right? And I don't know exactly what that means. I do know, if I cannot speak necessarily to the onesies, but there's a brilliant young researcher by the name of Zelia Edgar, and she has done several deep dives about ET fashion, which I think is something that is definitely worth talking about. So I encourage everybody. Her YouTube channel is Just Another Tinfoil Hat, and Zelia is absolutely brilliant.
Very cool. Yeah. All right, here's a question from Michael Kennedy for you, Mr. Cutchin. Have you read the 29 winning essays of the Bigelow Institute of Consciousness Studies? I have not.
I have not, and I should have. I should have at this point. I haven't had the chance to do that. I know some of the folks who contributed essays, and I think very highly of them. So,
what's his name? Mr. Mishlove he won an award for his essays on, I think it was near-death experiences. Mm-hmm. Okay, let me just move along here. Hide that current comment. And here's another one from Michael. He says, I've asked both Preston and Dolly, however, Mr. Cutchin, do you know or are you aware of the large UFO too large to move that Russ Coulthart, I guess, speaks on not releasing?
What is this anecdote referring to specifically? Is this the craft that's larger inside than from the outside, or is it?
No, this is apparently a huge craft. Ross Coulthart, I think, said that there was a huge craft that was so large they couldn't move it. They just built a warehouse around it.
Oh no, nope, don't know anything about it. I mean, well, it's probably too late. The hour is too late to talk about UFO crashes and go down that rabbit hole. But I have thoughts. But that's interesting. I should look into that personally. Sorry about that.
All right. Well, I don't know about it either. Just a Gen X dirtbag baby asks, Preston Dennett, could you please ask our guest if he's ever come across any experiencers who have discussed anything in regards to any, quote, sound control being used on them by ETs?
In terms of aboard the craft, I'm sure that there's an example that I'm not thinking of off the top of my head. The first thing that comes to mind, though, is the presence of implants and the fact that sometimes people will hear transmissions of some sort or buzzes and whatnot, and there is the assertion that these implants have some sort of controlling mechanism inside to manipulate, experiencers. Again, I don't know how we square that with our interpretation of the phenomenon as largely positive, but but we probably don't need to go down that road right now. But that's the first thing that comes to mind. So I would think that it would be something that you would find if you would do a study of the literature. Yeah.
All right, I've got 5 more here, but then there's 30 comments I haven't even looked at yet. Let's just get these when I put stars next to. Joneson for Meeting is asking, what about David Huggins' experiences with the procreation aspect, which does come up a lot in UFO onboard experiences? Are there any old stories that correlate with that regarding the Fae?
Not only does it correlate, it correlates precisely, not necessarily to David's. I'm not exactly sure. I don't recall what David said the motivation behind that was, but I do know that it's a very common trope to hear that these races, including the Greys, are procreating because their own race is dying. And you can go back through, I mean, not exclusively the only reason, but I have heard that. And you can actually go through some of the older fairy folklore and find specific allusions to that very thing. The idea that we're choosing to procreate with people, we are choosing to steal children because our own race needs, refreshing. So on top of that, the abduction of mortal spouses for procreation and the creation of human fairy hybrids, something that you see all over the older folklore as well. Yeah. And if you read the descriptions of these human fairy hybrids from something like, I don't know, Walter Evans Wentz or some of these older fairy books, they sound like indigo children, right? Like, they're artistically adept and they're intelligent and precocious and all those sort of things too. So it's an interesting correlation there as well.
All right. Now I have 14 questions because I found some more. These are some good ones, though. Okay. Alilistar1. Have you ever heard of contactees being made to swim in a vat full of green, thickish liquid that you can breathe in? Ah, the breathing pool.
Yeah, I have heard of this. I can't give any examples, and I'm going through my PDF right now to see if I can. I can't find them, but yeah, I have heard of that. Have you heard of that, Preston?
I certainly have. I did a article. Well, it's in one of my Not From Here books, which are kind of like yours. They cover some of the stranger, more paranormal outlying aspects. I call it the breathing pool because I had a couple of cases where people they breathe this liquid. It's we have perfluorocarbons here, which is super oxygenated liquid,
like in the abyss.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's actually reality. The military's developed it, and they were using sailors as guinea pigs to amplify it and perfect it.
Apparently, the rat in the abyss was actually breathing those.
Yes, it was. Exactly. Yeah.
And I seem to recall, maybe if we're looking for specific examples, I seem to recall a story from Brett Oldham about that, but it
wouldn't surprise. Yeah, I found about 10 or 20, but I think it has probably medical reasons. I asked Dolly about it. She's like, yeah, that can be a healing procedure.
They do it, yeah, for your lungs.
It's people acceleration.
It's part of the immune system. Your lung, you have an immune system. Your body, all your glands help to regulate your immune system, and it's in contact with your your DNA regulates it at the base of it, and breathing in. While you're in the womb, you're breathing amniotic fluid into your lungs, in and out. It recycles constantly. And it keeps your lungs supple, moist. It keeps them from becoming infected. It filters out all kinds of things, and it keeps this apparatus going until you actually expel it and then breathe real air. And it is healing when somebody has serious problems with their lungs or a tumor or whatever. There's 1,000 things that can go wrong with your breathing. They can heal you in these. It's like a tub, a pool. And
makes sense. Yeah.
So it's just to help the body recuperate and its own immune system kick back up and work properly. So
I like this next question. Has Joshua come across any research on body markings? Because we see that with UFO onboard experiences, and I think the mark of the witch or something.
Yeah, I mean, I've sort of done a deeper dive on this recently, and I'll try to keep this as quick as I can. But I have found some. A colleague of mine has found some older writings about saints being given a barb by the devil that when they try to poke at it on their hand, it moves around and moves away from their fingers, which is, you hear in a lot of
That sounds like an implant.
Sounds exactly like an implant. And then, interestingly enough, again, going back to the fairy stuff, the words blast, blister, and blustery all share the same Germanic root, because it was once believed that the fairies would hit you with a fairy blast that would cause a blister if you offended them. And whenever you would open them up, there would be just things and like bits of ceramic or bits of bone or tooth or, wood or something inside that was caused by the fairies. And that puts me in the mindset of some of the analyses that have been done on implants, where the claim, at least, is that these are mundane objects that have become embedded underneath the skin. So there even is a sort of analog for alien implants in the fairy traditions as well. I just find that wild.
So interesting. Oh my gosh, I love that you're so educated on all this. Really interesting insights here.
I have such weird retention for some of this stuff, and I can't quite explain it.
Wow. All right. What else do we have here? Let's see. This is from JT. Good evening. Have a question. Have you heard of the encounters that some have had with flying winged humanoids that are seen flying without the need to flap their wings? Well, we have those modern day accounts. There's Spring-Heeled Jack from early England.
Right.
I don't know how far back that goes, though.
I think if you look back to the airship wave, you can find some accounts of similar things that were always sort of believed to be jet packs or jet propulsion packs. A good place to look for this would be Ken Gerhardt's book on flying humanoids. I do know that there are some encounters in there that describe this very thing. Yeah.
All right. Well, here is another question about alien implants from Kuhn. What's the procedure to remove alien implants? Well, Dr. Lear did it surgically.
Right.
Some people claim they can remove etheric implants with their.
Well, I mean, that has a precedent in shamanic healing. That's something.
Oh, really?
Streamer had one in his ear, and they went to go get it, and it moved all the way out of the way, in front of the doctor and everything. They watched it go away, and when they closed him back up and gave up, it moved back down where it was. And I have an implant that moves.
Who's at the forefront of implant research now? Is it Daryl Sims, I guess, or
I think he's about it.
Probably like the only person I can think of. Yeah.
It's a shame, because that's an interesting aspect. All right. What does Joshua think? This is from Sovereign Cosmic Wildman. What does Joshua think the reasons are for people being taken near ocean coastlines? I'm not sure if there's a connection there. Is there?
Well, I mean, so this reminds me a bit, I was looking into the work of John Keel and talking about window areas and things, and he's all like, oh, within a 200-mile radius of ancient archaeological sites are window areas. And I'm like, well, John, if you do that, like the entire eastern seaboard is a window area, right? Because you've got these overlapping things. So I think there's a little bit of sort of a population pareidolia going on here, because the coasts just tend to be the most heavily populated areas. So that might be a factor. I think there's also something to be said for, that sort of Ivan T. Sanderson idea of invisible residents at the bottom of the ocean and USOs, and how that ties into all this as well. It might be a simple matter of proximity of these things coming out of and then returning back to the ocean.
Oh my God, we're almost out of time, you guys.
Okay. Well, it's water anywhere all over the globe, and they do it to drop in and cool off. Okay, and if you're by the ocean and you see them, they're going to come and check you out. If they're in a lake cooling off, they're going to come and check you out. Look at how many bodies of water there are on this planet, and how many. Start pinpointing where the sightings are and who's being picked up and why. The Great Lakes is a real great example. The Midwest is a very high action area, and most people don't realize why. And it's because they can rapidly cool off, and go into populated areas and then come out quickly. So that's why. Period. No underground bases. They just cool off.
I want to do a rapid fire on these last 5 questions. You only get 10 to 20 seconds for each question to answer.
Okay. Yeah, we're close. 4 minutes, people. 4.
Okay, that's right. It's got to be rapid fire. Here we go. Allison Carr says, I believe Bigfoot are good beings. What's your take, Joshua?
Largely agree, but with like anything, you can make things mad.
Yes. Go.
Okay. Sovereign Cosmic Wildman's asking, what exactly are the Fae, and are they from the underground realms?
That's a good question.
It's a perennial question in fairy studies. There is an argument that they are nature elementals, although that's primarily a development from theosophy. Prior to the rise of theosophy, they were thought of as the human dead, and they also might be demoted pagan deities. It's something that fairy scholars talk about a lot. There is definitely an underground component there, perhaps encouraged by that association with the human dead.
Wow.
All right, let's see. Don't know if you can answer this. What's your most interesting Dogman case?
Not in 20 seconds.
Okay.
See, another reason you're going to come back. Okay.
Do the Fae gift rocks?
They can gift whatever they dang well please. But I would say that rocks do seem to be potent vectors for having energies attached to them. You look at certain people who take rocks from places and have strings of bad luck. So I would, fairies can gift whatever they please.
One more.
Rocks.
Sorry, guys. This is it. Have to ask because Neural Channels gave us a generous super chat. So, any possession or exorcism events? Thanks for the super chat, Neural Channels.
In regards specifically to, I think that to fully understand possessions and exorcisms, I think it's important to sort of place them beside the concept of walk-ins and things like that. Perhaps this idea that Rudy Shield and Susie Hansen talked about of the dual soul connection, dual souls as well with ET. I think that it does seem that things can move in to our bodies if we're not careful, or if we invite them in, or I think it's possible.
All right. Well, I think we're going to have to wrap it up here, but people in chat are absolutely loving the show. Really great conversation this evening.
Yeah, absolutely.
Joshua's a great guest. Joshua, please come back. Please come back, Joshua. Great show,
Yes.
Joshua.
Yeah, we're going to set a date up. Okay. No kidding.
Okay.
And wait, let me flash your books real quick. And while I'm doing this, please let us know how we can reach you. There are your links in the description, but anything you want to promote right now, I'll give you a minute or two.
Yeah, quickly. I am teaching a 9-week course on the near-death experience and how it intersects with a lot of these different contact modalities. That begins March 23rd. More information can be found at the website cosmosinstitute.org. That's Cosmos with a K, KOSMOS institute.org. Wonderful organization that's put together this course, and it looks like a really good opportunity to learn more about near-death experiences and have Q&As. We're going to have my friend Shirley Black is going to be coming on as well for a Q&A, so it should be a good time.
Awesome.
All right. Well,
Any thoughts, Preston?
No, we have to close it up, Dolly. We're
All
done.
right, well, here we go. You have been listening to The Light Gate. Thank you all for showing up on this beautiful Monday. We hope you come back again, and we definitely want to do this again quickly. I don't want to let this one lie down for too long. We have been coming to you live from the beautiful city of New Orleans in Louisiana at the United Public Radio Network at 107.7 FM and the UFO Paranormal Radio Network at 105.3 FM. We love you. We hope you have a great week. See you next Monday. Mwah. Bye. Namaste.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.